Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's IAB Europe webinar. I'm Marie-Claire. I am the Marketing and Industry Programmes Manager at IAB Europe, and I'll just be doing a short intro and then handing over to the Chair of our Programmatic Trading Committee, David Goddard, who will be your presenter and moderator for today's session. David will kick off with an overview of our recently published Guide to the Post-Third-Party Cookie Era, and he will then be joined by a panel of experts to discuss this evolution in our industry. If you haven't already accessed it, the guide is available in the Knowledge Hub on the IAB Europe website, which is iabeurope.eu. So before I hand over, just a couple of housekeeping points to note. We do encourage you to submit your questions for today's speakers in the Q&A box, which can be found at the bottom of the Zoom window, and we will aim to answer as many of those as possible. Any other queries, technical queries, etc., can be sent to myself via the chat box. And this webinar is being recorded and will be available to view on our website later on today. So with that, I'm going to hand over to David and leave you in his capable hands.
Thank you very much, Marie-Claire. Hello, everybody. My name is David Goddard, and I'm the Double Verify's Senior Director of Business Development in EMEA, responsible for expanding partnerships with digital, media, and technology companies. I'm also the Chair of IAB Europe's Programmatic Trading Committee, a multi-stakeholder group which aims to increase the understanding of the programmatic ecosystem, the impact it is having on the digital advertising, and influence the industry via initiatives. One such initiative is this webinar. 2020 kicked off with one of the most fundamental technology advances our industry has seen in many years, the announcement that third-party cookies were to be depleted. There's a lot of debate about how the post-cookie era will affect future business models in digital advertising industry and what alternative solutions are being developed. Fortunately, the IAB Europe has published a guide to provide an overview of factors that have contributed to the evolution, how the absence of third-party cookies will affect the execution of digital advertising campaigns, and an overview of the alternative solutions being developed. So here's the agenda for this session. I'll present a high-level introduction into a number of topics covered in depth in the guide. These are a new era for digital advertising. I'll give a brief intro into the IAB Europe's Guide to Post-Cookie Third-Party Cookie Era, the three contributing factors to this new era, and current solutions. I will also highlight how to get involved in the solution, and then I will moderate the highlight and majority of the session, which is the panel discussion. We have audience Q&A throughout, and I'll attempt to weave these questions into the panel queues. So as Marie-Claire said, at the start, please submit your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. The blocking of third-party cookies in Chrome will bring the single biggest challenge to the digital advertising ecosystem since the introduction of real-time bidding in 2009. Currently, approximately 30% of all available impressions are rendered on browsers with no third-party cookies, mostly on Safari and Firefox. As Chrome accounts for approximately 65% of remaining browser usage, it is expected that this change will essentially end the use of third-party cookies. As the headline suggests, the cookie has crumbled. From advertising perspective, this will result in the following fundamental changes. Frequency capping is largely based on third-party cookies, so this feature will no longer be available in its current form. Third-party data currently being used for audience targeting will become unusable. Retargeting and most forms of dynamic creative targeting will become unworkable. Data management platforms cannot create identity linkages in the same way they do today. Last or multi-touch attribution will no longer be possible using cookies. In order to address this challenge, IAB Europe's Programmatic Trading Committee worked together to develop a guide to answer a few of these questions. This guide has been developed by experts from IAB Europe's Programmatic Trading Committee. It provides background to the current use of cookies in digital advertising today, and an overview of the alternative solutions being developed. As solutions evolve, the Programmatic Trading Committee will be updating this guide on a regular basis to provide the latest information and guidance on market alternatives to third-party cookies. The guide will also provide answers to the following questions. What factors have contributed to the depletion of third-party cookies? How will depletion of third-party cookies impact stakeholders and the wider industry, including proprietary platforms, otherwise known as closed ecosystems? How will the absence of third-party cookies affect the execution of digital advertising campaigns? What solutions currently exist to replace the usage of third-party cookies? What industry solutions are currently being developed and by whom? How can I or you get involved in contributing to the different solutions? As explained and explored in detail in the guide, there are three key areas to look at in terms of the key developments in digital advertising over the last 2 years, which have contributed to the decision to deplete the third-party cookie. One is a legal environment related to consent and tracking. Two is browser gatekeeping. And third, ad blocking. Advertisers will always need a means to connect with online users. They will need to reach people, both current and prospective customers, in relevant environments and engage with them with content that resonates. The digital advertising industry relies on this fundamental truth, and it's unlikely to change as digital acquires more of the marketing budget. With that said, third-party cookies have been instrumental in advertising online for over 25 years. There are a number of alternative solutions in development, and it is still relatively early stages. The IAB Europe's guide identifies three key areas of solutions. Identity solutions. Examples include CRM data, mobile advertising IDs, ID consortiums, for example, Digitrust, NetID, or using multiple IDs in pre-bid. Another alternative solution is the use of other advertising data to make targeting decisions. Examples include metrics such as share on screen, video presentation, audible, etc. And the final alternative solution, contextual intelligence or contextual targeting, which is not a new concept, as a similar approach has been used in print media for decades, where specific publications or editorial will be paired with relevant advertising to reach the right consumer at the right time. They are in the right mindset to be receptive to your product or service. However, contextual targeting has evolved considerably in the age of big data and AI. The guide explains the role of identity and identifiers used today, as well as each area of development in detail. And the industry has a unique opportunity to evolve and advance over the next 24 months. We encourage all stakeholders to explore how they can get involved with the relevant industry groups to contribute to develop solutions for the industry. Contributing to shaping solutions differs widely from advertiser, publisher, technology vendor, and from role to role in an organization. The majority of solutions are open to public comment and contribution. However, impact and influence of that input, as well as breadth of access, varies widely. We've broken these down into 4 high-level categories: regulatory solutions, for example, GDPR or CCPA, independent industry solutions, such as Project REARC, private solutions, like ID5 and the Trade Desk, and browser initiatives, such as W3C and Chrome. IAB Europe, in partnership with IAB France, has also just launched a new joint task force, the Post-Third-Party Cookie Task Force. The joint task force will bring European national IABs and their corporate members together to promote homegrown European ideas that surface within the task force and to consolidate and submit feedback on proposals emanating from the W3C and REARC, including the Chrome Privacy Sandbox. On a local level, many national IABs have set up task forces to discuss and feedback on solutions being developed. So get in contact with your local IAB to find out how you can get involved. Now on to our panel, and I'm very excited, like you all are, to hear from our panel of experts on the evolution of digital advertising in a post-third-party cookie era. So let's jump straight in. First, I would like to invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves, and as they all contributed to the IAB Europe's post-cookie guide, I want them to answer the question, why is an output like this so important, and how do you see the guide being used by stakeholders in the industry? So I'm going to hand over to our first panelist to answer that question and introduce themselves, Ben H. And we've got two Bens today, so Ben H, please jump in.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much, David, and for that intro. So my name is Ben Hancock. I'm Global Head of Programmatic Trading at CNN International. So yeah, the document, really important, really detailed, and I think that there's a few reasons for that. Firstly, there's been quite a lot of confusion around this in the industry. So Google really dropped that bombshell that they're going to deprecate the third-party cookie at the end of next year. And I think what the document really does is really pull everything together in terms of what the repercussions are going to be right across the industry. And it's really important that we understand them and how it's going to affect all of the stakeholders. And lastly, I think the most important thing it does, and like David mentioned at the end of that presentation, is it acts as a real call to action for the industry to come together. We work in a really fragmented industry, so it's absolutely crucial that we agree on a solution and move forward with that together.
Thank you, Ben. And Miles.
Great. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Miles Pritchard. I'm the Managing Partner of Data Management Solutions at OMD EMEA. It's a team of 25 people. It's the fastest growing team in our agency. And our team is comprised of data engineers, technology specialists and consultants that help our clients to maximize the full value of their own data assets, but also to explore and to partner with the wider ecosystem in order to extract maximum value from data in a second or a third-party context. I think building on the points that were just raised, I think the identity ecosystem has been in a state of what I call staged freefall for at least the past half decade. Pretty much as long as I can remember, at least. And whether it's new identifiers coming into the ecosystem or existing identifiers being removed from the ecosystem, we're clearly having to think about identity in a completely different way today than we did previously. And I think what's great about this white paper is that it establishes the context and lets us understand where we are today, but it also starts to begin to set a blueprint for how we can plan and work with identity moving forwards.
Thank you, Miles. Ben G.
Hello, everybody. It's Ben Geach here, the second Ben of your panel today. I look after the audience, the context, and our measurement solutions from a product perspective at the Oracle Data Cloud. As regards the guide that we published, the value for me is really in its practical application. So I see it really as a tool for marketers to be able to plan for a future state, a future that is coming pretty soon. We have both cookie-based and cookieless technologies in the portfolio of products that I oversee, and every one of our solutions is affected in some way by the variation in the number of third-party cookies. So I really think it's a time for us to reassess, to adapt and adopt new approaches to media planning, our activation and our reporting, all which are key components to being able to plan and determine whether our media spend has been effective. It's not a unique challenge to any one particular part of the ecosystem. If you're a publisher, an advertiser, or an agency, you need to make adjustments. That's the reality of it. So my words of encouragement are to keep the guide handy over the coming months and years as the changes unfold, because I think it'll be a really good reference guide to come back to. And as I say, we plan to update this as well going forward, because things change fast in the ad tech industry.
Thank you, Ben. And Sarah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Vincent. I head up the strategic partner development team at Index Exchange, and my remit is EMEA. Thank you for inviting me on the panel today. It was great to partake in the guide itself, and obviously now to have a chance to speak about it too. I think now more than ever, it's important that we emphasise to the industry how important it is that we come together and build solutions together. So this guide, I think, is a really clear example of that happening. All stakeholders working together in conjunction to understand how, as an industry, we've not only reached the point we're at, but how we can work to build a stronger future. This is the starting point, really. It's, if you we're fully aware of it before, it's now it's time to read up on it. I'm hoping now that anyone who has read the guide is thinking about how they can now get involved, where they sit and fit into the scenario, and how they can affect change within their own part of this ecosystem.
Thank you, and welcome all panelists. The next question is, the guide shows us that there are 3 key factors that are contributing to the depletion of third-party cookies. Not that you need reminding, these are legal environment, browser gatekeeping, and ad blocking. Do you think there's been a dominant factor, or are they all equal? Or are there any other factors that we need to consider that we've left out? I'm going to come to Ben H again first.
Great. Thanks, David. So yeah, I think what's happened here is there's kind of a wider narrative that's been going on really since we started using this technology. So conventional wisdom in this industry has always told us that more data, more targeting, more measurement was really the answer to all of our problems. But I think ultimately, with the benefit of hindsight, I think we can all agree that maybe that was a bit short-termist. Maybe it wasn't always in the user's interest to do that. I think also importantly, the value exchange between the industry and our audience has been implicit. So we just kind of stumbled into this place whereby it was okay to sort of the industry could do what they wanted with users' data. It doesn't help at all that this technology is completely abstract. It's obviously technical. It's very hard to understand. And really, what's happened with a few kind of big events in the last few years is that these issues hit the media. Awareness of them grew enormously, and there's been a kind of a significant backlash against them. So I think all those 3 points are really important. And I think where this takes us to now is really it's an opportunity really for us to have a bit of a reset and build an ecosystem that's, I think, really importantly more transparent, and ultimately puts our audience first, because that's the absolutely crucial part of that. And we're going to be in an era when that privacy is absolutely comes first.
Thank you, Ben H. And Ben G.
Sure, yes, so I absolutely believe that all 3 of the factors have contributed. But if we look at Europe, which I'm guessing that a lot of the participants that are on the call are dialing in from today, the GDPR legislation has really caused the industry to sit up and listen. So they've realised that there needs to be an alternative plan for the future. For me, it's clear that if you take a consent-only approach to data collection, touching on Ben Hancock's opinions on the user privacy and the various different levels that consumers are getting more involved and more aware of their data, that this is a huge impact to your third-party targeting tactics. So this means in practical sense that many brands are unable to reach the prospects and customers in the volumes that they did before. So it's led to a load of different changes, and I know that we'll talk about a few of them later, but the resurgence in cookieless technologies is the obvious one here, like contextual targeting, which is looking at the content of the page and the environment that the ad is displayed in, rather than that user's own behavior. But I've seen this across the world as well. So with further afield, consumers are becoming much more aware of the data that they're being collected about them, that's being shared and that's being processed online, and ultimately the value exchange that it gives. So this is very much being backed by legislation such as CCPA in the USA and LGPD in Brazil, which is coming shortly, which will follow a very similar model to GDPR-like language. I think it's important also to recognise that third-party data is relevant even if third-party cookies are eliminated. So there's a whole load of different data collection methodologies and things like mobile ad IDs, the Apple IDFAs, which are components which you can use. So the toolbox that a marketer can use is not fully depleted. There are just different ways to approach it. But let's get back to basics here. The reality in marketing and for advertisers is that they need to connect with users online. As we've seen, the growth in digital means that the spend is not going to decrease from this, but they need to reach them in environments which they'd resonate well with. So there's a lot of innovation that needs to happen now, and I think the industry collaboration is going to be key here.
Thanks, Ben. And Miles, you're our kind of buy-side representative here. What's your point of view on this?
Yeah, I mean, my point of view is, I don't know about dominant, but I do think domino effect with this. You know, those three main drivers certainly aren't operating in vacuum. I think that what you had is a more sophisticated consumer that understood better how data was being collected and the implications on their own personal privacy. I think that led to implications in terms of the legal and regulatory frameworks, the GDPR and the CCPA frameworks that have already been mentioned. And I think we created a perfect environment within which Apple was able to apply strategic and tactical commercial pressure on its main competitor. It was absolutely a very clear tactical approach that Apple Safari took by putting itself at the forefront of a privacy-centric approach. An approach, by the way, that wouldn't have gathered any ground if individual consumers didn't care about privacy. So I think that all of those things are very well connected, and ultimately it's been a perfect storm leading to the deprecation of the third-party cookie. I would say, though, in counter, that we shouldn't overstate it. You know, there is an organic effect here, a natural effect. The third-party cookie is old technology, and it has its limitations, and those limitations have been revealed over the past several years, specifically with the introduction of new capability, new identifiers, and a diversification in media personalization. So it was mentioned the introduction of mobile device ID, other types of identification, other types of capability around cookieless personalization and media activity. You know, all of these have had a dramatic impact on the use and utilization and the overall importance of the third-party cookie in our ecosystem, which, although I acknowledge is still important and it is a problem that needs to be solved, I think the inherent importance of the third-party cookie has been on the wane for the past several years.
Thank you, Miles. And Sarah.
Thank you. Yes, I would say that changes in legal environment, browser gatekeeping have probably been, of those three, the two most prominent factors contributed towards the depletion of the third-party cookie. Ad blocking is interesting, though. I think it was probably the first or the start of users taking more control. So the three together, you know, obviously we can't separate them out really. But I think for now we're thinking about these three elements in the context of what is best for the consumer. I think Ben H mentioned this, that we need to be adopting a user-first approach, privacy first, and thinking about crafting solutions that will deliver the best possible user experience. In terms of other factors, we should not forget that the depletion of the third-party cookie has been contributing towards the growth in ad spend on walled gardens and environments where marketers are able to, or already benefiting from and focusing on delivering addressability without a third-party cookie. So the fact that Google has put like a deadline on this is interesting, but it's something that we should have been looking at anyway. Like the money was already going, flowing away from the open web, flowing away from the premium publishers. So we have like users spent 45% of their time within these walled gardens environment, but these gardens are actually receiving around 70% of ad spend. So the imbalance is already quite significant, and this should have been addressed already. As I said, Google has put a deadline on it, but we also need to think about what trends were happening outside of this particular before the announcement came. So it's good that there's a timeline on this now, and we need to make steps towards it and bring the parity between the walled gardens, which bring full addressability, they are user first, and make that the same in the open web.
It's definitely forcing us to rethink, and hopefully the solution is the right solution we're doing. But we'll come on to that shortly, and it actually puts us perfectly into the next question. So thank you, Sarah. We outlined 3 key areas of solutions being developed as well. Again, as a reminder, these are identity, use of other advertising data, and contextual intelligence or targeting. Do you think one of these can work together, or will one be more prominent than others? I'm going to come to you, Sarah, again, as you teed me up so nicely for that.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. Oh God, tech gremlins today. I think they can all work together, and the balance of which, though, or to the extent of which one has prominence, will likely be determined by the advertiser, essentially, and what they're seeking to achieve across their spend. Again, I would urge user-first solutions built around deterministic first-party data will become the clearest path forward. We should also seek to build like an overarching collaborative strategy that can provide authentication and addressability. And this means replacing the third-party cookie, very brittle as it is, that exists between the publisher and the marketer's data, and replacing this with something much more robust. We're really excited to be working with a number of tech partners across this space, Trade Desk, LiveRamp, LiveIntent, and really helping to offer some consumer-first solutions here. So we know it can be done. We know the intention is there to do this. So yeah, we're quite excited to see where this goes.
Great, thank you, Sarah. And Ben H.
So thanks, David. I think for me, content is absolutely crucial, and that's where it all flows from. And I think if you look at what we've done at CNN International, first and foremost, yes, we are a news provider, but in the last few years we've worked really hard to expand what we've done outside of news. So we've got a really strong business section, really strong style section, which are great content verticals in their own right, and we've been doing this separately, kind of outside what's been happening with the ad ecosystem. I think for me, once you have that quality of content, firstly you can attract a more diverse audience that really stems through to what we're talking about in terms of targeting, and you can also expand your audience as well, because it goes without saying that a greater amount of users are going to be attracted by really premium content. So I think for premium publishers, absolutely that focus must be on quality content, and I think a lot flows from there.
Thanks, Ben. And Miles, look, I'm really keen to get your buy-side perspective on this, but there's been a couple of questions, and one from Mariana as well. So thank you very much for submitting that, an anonymous question, which is tied into this really. Mariana's question is, how will the third-party cookies removal affect current metrics such as view-through conversions that the industry uses quite a lot? And we've already highlighted that conversion tracking is going to be heavily impacted there. And will remarketing campaigns that use first-party cookies be affected as well? The answer is yes, if those first-party cookies are being looked to use outside of their initial environment, i.e. deemed as a second or a third-party cookie in a current scenario. With those kind of two questions, I'd be keen to think, I'm guessing these are similar questions to you're tackling as well. So coming back to that question, kind of wrapping in those, we've outlined 3 key ones. Do you think one of these will work better for you, or are you considering all of the above?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, first and foremost, we're considering all of the above, particularly in the context of targeting and media decisioning. So, when we're planning and when we're looking to activate digital media activity, it's always a mixed economy. And we're looking to balance the correct set of tools and instruments to be able to put the right person, rather the right ad in front of the right person at the right time. That doesn't really change. That's going to be a balance of direct deals that we're doing with publishers and content providers, contextual tools and instruments that we can use to better ascertain the current in-moment environment, as well as more longitudinal assessments of a user's value and the relevance of a particular creative message or a piece of content to a user at a particular point in time. And that's really where the conversation turns to identity. It is the historical view, the longitudinal assessment, where we're able to accrue insight and intelligence against a user, an individual, or a group of individuals over a period of time. The question that was asked around conversion, measurement, reporting, attribution, this is, I think, more where our conversations with our clients tend to focus. Not that targeting is not incredibly important, but I think certainly the deprecation of the third-party cookie has driven more conversation around attribution and effectiveness measurement. And I think that will be a pure play identity conversation, as opposed to having solutions defined within pre-bid or within contextual-based technology. And so, although we don't have a single set solution for a industry problem, which will be how do we measure effectively across domain and across channel, we're going to come on to the solutions that we are discussing and we are thinking about in a moment, I believe. Clearly, there is going to be a requirement to replace in part that base level capability that the third-party cookie has provided by allowing cross-domain measurement and by allowing cross-channel measurement and attribution. And there are a lot of promising solutions within that sphere. Sarah mentioned earlier the walled gardens, and clearly within those environments, there will be an ability to measure and to attribute within those environments to a certain degree of aggregation or abstraction through data clean rooms that I think will help and to support some level of accountability, but clearly more needs to be done to be able to support the open web within that sphere. Otherwise, we simply won't be able to compare the two apples to apples. And more fundamentally, I think the issue that the open web will face is that it will be undervalued in a sense because it cannot be measured and cannot be attributed as effectively.
Thank you, Miles, and thank you very much for answering a couple of questions I just sprung on you there from the Q&A so well. So I appreciate that. I mean, as you said, we all have examples where we're trying to deliver these solutions. And coming on to that, can you provide any examples of which of these solutions you may envisage being used for the following use cases? And we've highlighted measurement, reporting, attribution, and targeting as well. So I'm going to start with Ben G, if that's okay.
Sure, of course, yeah. So with the huge troves of third-party data declining, a more refined version of contextual targeting that's been called in the industry sort of contextual intelligence is getting a really strong second look. So this is a different way of being able to apply targeting to the same sort of, to reach the same sort of users that you would have done through cookie-based targeting. So just to get everyone up to speed, if they're not familiar with it, contextual advertising helps advertisers increase the impact of advertising by delivering ads in content which is relevant to the ads that are being served. So it's often, I refer to it as mindset marketing. So it's about getting the right ad placed against the right content at the right time when consumers are in the right mindset to be able to find it useful and well placed as well. So I think it may be useful if I sort of highlight an example of a customer that we worked with, which is Disneyland Paris. So something which I'm sure we'll all be familiar with. And this is really a business that's built around families finding fun and escape from the everyday. I'm sure that that's something much needed at the moment. And when their parks reopen, there'll be a flood of visitors in for just that reason. So at a campaign level, they really wanted to drive better ROI by reducing the CPA and increasing the conversion rates on their campaigns. So some strong but fairly standard metrics to be able to do there. They were a heavy third-party cookie-based audience buyer previously. So they really had to think differently about how they were going to approach this ahead of time before the audiences that they were using day to day would diminish significantly. So this is where the contextual solutions came in, and this was across some of their display and their video campaigns, which really ensured that Disney's ads appeared in the right environments and reached those audiences at the scale that they had previously had with cookie-based solutions. Alongside it, there'll be no surprise that Disney wanted to avoid brand unsuitable content, and which would seriously harm the brand. So there were custom brand safety segments that were created, and it's custom brand safety is essentially the same technology that you use for contextual intelligence, but applied in an avoidance tactic to avoid unsuitable content. So it's understanding what the page is about, understanding that it's something that doesn't fit very well with the brand, and then avoiding that content. So the sort of the flip of the positive contextual targeting. So what happened? Well, they ran this solution, they ran contextual intelligence on it, and it resulted in a large uplift in their CPA, 250% reduction, I should say, in their CPA for their display campaigns, and a double or 2 times increase in conversions. So as well as these hard metrics, the campaign performed really well, and they felt that it achieved its goals for contributing to a better online experience, which is a bit of an intangible metric, but something that is highly valued for many brands. And of course, I think it's worth pointing out, and this is something that's been echoed through some of the questions that have come through, that the historical metrics that we use to assess whether a campaign was effective or not, some of them are not immediately portable into the cookieless environments, such as CPA, ROAS, offline attribution. But there's still a wide range of metrics which continue to work, such as measuring valid traffic, for example, on those campaigns, viewability, brand safety, click-through rate, interactions rates on ad units. So there's a whole load of different metrics which are applicable here in a cookieless world, or third-party, or a world which has a reduction in third-party cookies, I should say. But it may require just a different perspective on using those to assess the effectiveness of your campaigns.
Thanks, Ben. Miles, I'm going to come to you next because you highlighted a couple of scenarios as well, but now's a chance for you to give us an example of how these solutions are going to be used for agency and advertiser purposes.
Yeah, I can certainly try my best. Unfortunately, I can't name any names, but we have been working with our clients for several months to try and address the identity ecosystem and the current nature of the identity ecosystem. Now, most of these conversations began last year before Google had actually announced that it was going to deprecate the third-party cookie. And in fact, a lot of the work that we're doing today with respects to identity management and resolution could well be outdated by the time we get to the end of this year. Certainly, I think would need to be somewhat re-architected, given the hints that, say, the mobile device ID, the IDFA, is also heading on its way out. But just as an example, with respects to measurement, attribution, and really the development of a single customer view, working with a client within the travel vertical, which historically, as most people will know, have long buying cycles. We've been focusing very much on trying to transpose data that was historically collected against a cookie identifier into a more persistent and more robust and more stable identity, so that we can hold the information over a longer period of time, so that we can retain the intelligence and then put that into action on an on-demand basis. Now, we began that work at the beginning of this year, and it's really, I think, been a blessing in disguise in many ways. We began it, as I said, because we wanted to better attribute our media activity and digital behavior to conversion activity and physical movements of people within a specific geography over a broader period of time, in order to be able to better take into account that long consideration phase and the long buy cycle. Now, what we did ultimately established an insurance policy against what we did not know was going to happen, which was the COVID-19 situation and the ensuing lockdown and travel restrictions. Now, because of the work that we did in the first 2 months of this year, where most of the prospecting activity was live, most of the awareness generating activity was live, that was then over the rest of Q1 and into Q2 going to drive through to consideration and drive through to the actual decision to purchase in and around the summertime. Because of the work that we did there to retain that information in a more stable identity and to transpose cookie data sets into mobile advertising ID data sets and pseudonymized PII, hashed email address and hashed mobile phone, we've actually been able to retain a lot of the intelligence that we developed through the first 2 months of this year, which has been incredibly valuable to our client, because when they come now to the point of looking to relaunch potentially in the next 8 to 12 weeks, they'll have a data set of pre-qualified individuals on whom we have a certain level of intelligence and information that we'll be able to activate on an on-demand basis, because we're using a much more persistent form of identity. So as an insurance policy that we didn't even know that we were buying, that's a pretty good example, I think, of how just a better understanding and a higher level of engagement with identity resolution and identity management solutions can help advertisers, publishers, pretty much anybody across the ecosystem.
That's great. So it's not you're not only future-proofing their kind of advertising business, but they're seeing benefits now. It's great.
Exactly. You can imagine, again, I won't talk specifics, but upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in the first 2 months of this year, building awareness and trying to drive people at the very top of the purchase funnel, that then you can re-engage and reactivate at lower points in the funnel. That investment would have been completely lost if we hadn't put this process in place.
Fantastic. So the future definitely looks bright, or even the present. Thank you. Ben H., I'm going to come to you for a publisher perspective, if you don't mind.
Yeah, definitely. So what we've been working really hard to do as kind of a reaction to this is build greater depth into how we build our contextual offerings for our clients. So I think with contextual specifically, it's the technology has moved on significantly from just what in the past was quite a blunt keyword approach. So, and I think we're seeing this born through now in the with current targeting in the with the COVID-19 crisis. So, instead of, for example, just offering advertisers the opportunity to block our content that references COVID-19, we can now offer a much more kind of nuanced approach to it. I always think keyword was a very kind of blunt tool to approach targeting, and I think actually really what's happening with cookies is really given this technology a bit of a nudge, and it's created an incentive to have a much better solution for this. So with our content, we can consider kind of the positivity or the negativity of a piece. We can look at sentiment really importantly as well. We can look at kind of the overall concept that a piece of content might have. So, yeah, in terms of what we can offer to our clients, because of this technology, it's a much more sophisticated, nuanced approach to how we can categorize our content.
Thank you, Ben. And Sarah, I know you wanted to talk about targeting as well.
Yes, a little bit, but I'm very much in support of what Miles has just said, essentially, which is, you know, I'm sure you're aware, Index was talking about identity a few years ago, but like banging the drum and feeling kind of like we think this is the way to go. But then it's obviously very much now come to the fore, and you know, we're very excited that many others are now, you know, we're all now in the same party. And this is what, so about a year and a half ago, we also started working on some solutions which didn't require the third-party cookie, from some forward-thinking marketers, but also working with, you know, quite advanced technology providers at the time. So over in North America, for example, we have a very close partnership with LiveRamp. We started transacting on their IDL, and saw like at one point actually a daily high of 110 million user matches on 8 billion ad requests, which is just a great stat, but also proving that there is, you know, the ability for advertisers today to transact on first-party data rather than relying on a third-party cookie identifier. And that authentication obviously leads to, you know, the increases in performance, which others have mentioned, you know, like the high CPMs and much more targeted campaigns that, you know, then enable the, you know, all the benefits that buyers are seeing in other platforms to then be seen across the open web as well. Yeah, so that was really just what I wanted to add on to Miles's point, really, that it's great to hear that these sort of tests, as it were, are actually happening already, irrespective of what's happening with the cookie, but just to prove that it can be done. And now the trick is, you know, the scalability of that, honing in perhaps on a few options rather than many that there are right now to solve this, and then obviously, yeah, taking it a step forward.
Thank you, Sarah. Actually, there's a question coming, and it leads us nicely into the next question, but it's talking about what you, Ben Hancock, and you were saying earlier on, and actually throughout kind of the panel discussion. And this has come from Simon Taylor, and it says, does kind of comments you're saying does strongly suggest that premium publishers will become the beneficiaries at the expense of the long tail. If that is the case, then is it a good trend for the industries to clean up the supply side? And maybe we can wrap this up, and I'll come to you, Ben, actually, because I think you'll be best to lead off on the question as well. How do publishers monetize their inventory without third-party cookies? But maybe we can wrap up talking around, you know, the premium publisher out there with maybe their strength in kind of first-party data and premium content. Do you foresee a time where you're going to see an increase of advertising activity on your platforms and domains?
Hopefully. I think, you know, look, I think without my CNN hat on, I think that was a really good question from, I think you said, Simon, about sort of what this means for the sort of the makeup of the internet, and the long tail of it. We've definitely been seeing a trend kind of away from the long tail a little bit, and I think that's been driven by brands wanting a safer ad experience and a more transparent ad experience. I think with that, it doesn't, you know, publishers or premium publishers, we don't have any kind of divine right just to own the whole, you know, just to own the experience of brands. There's a lot more going on out there. The kind of the point of the internet at the start, that it was this great democratizer, and, you know, very easy to kind of put content out there. But I think saying that, if brands want want to work with premium publishers, with that they'll be guaranteed a better quality premium experience, which is why they why they should work with publishers directly, instead of, I think the ISBA report suggested that the stat was about 40,000 odd sites is the average that advertisers tend to go on. I think another point is it's really important to bear in mind that, yes, third-party cookies are going away, but first-party cookies aren't going anywhere. So all of the stuff that we're talking about, the measurement, the attribution, the targeting, that can all be done within by publishers. We've said already that content is going to become more important. So maybe, yes, that does suggest at that point that Simon made is going to accelerate that trend more towards premium publishers. And I think for us, what it really means is that we're going to really focus on continuing our strategy of creating premium content, building out really strong first-party data solutions. And perhaps it's going to become a little bit more complicated now in terms of what we can offer for publishers. But what we want to do is really, what we can offer for advertisers and brands. But we want to work as closely as we can with as many brands as possible, really to open up our solutions for them.
Thank you, Ben. And before I jump to Miles, because it's really good to get a buy-side perspective on this kind of publisher question on a monetization. Sarah, I'll jump to you because you were mentioned in that, and in that question from Simon Taylor, really good question talking about the long tail, and you've got a interesting perspective being an SSP across multiple domains as well. So just in relation to that, do you see premium publishers benefiting from this shift? And also, how do publishers monetize their inventory without third-party cookies?
Yeah, so I think naturally premium publishers may benefit more from this from the shift, but that's not to say that that's at the expense of the long tail or the niche publishers, for example. Ben, as you said, advertisers are looking for premium publishers. They're also looking for users. So it could be that user is visiting all different types of sites, and therefore will be targeted across it. I think the opportunity to receive ad spend, though, is based on the ability to authenticate your user. So premium publishers maybe have more opportunity to do that because they can perhaps present the value exchange maybe a bit more comprehensively, and the users are maybe a bit more loyal, so they can actually start to obtain more first-party data. If it's login data, obviously that's highly valuable. But it may be that naturally premium publishers have more affinity to be able to do that than some of the longer tail. So in that respect, there might be an imbalance. But overall, and even if there is no kind of user data collection at the long tail end, there will still be advertising. This is not going to stop. It's just there will be the difference between the authenticated and the non-authenticated, or the trusted and the less trusted web. So the advertising experience will be different from users across those different kind of levels of site, I'd say.
Thank you very much. And Miles?
Yeah, I'm a little unsure as to where to begin. So I've just been thinking about the question that you received from Simon, and so I think the main beneficiaries of this will be the walled gardens. It'll be Google, Facebook, and Amazon. A very distant second will be premium publishers in terms of net beneficiaries of what we're seeing today in the identity ecosystem. So that's, I think, well, let's say my opinion on who's going to be a net beneficiary. I think with respect to publisher monetization, there's still a huge number of opportunities available to publishers in how to monetize specifically their audience. Getting, as Ben was mentioning, audience data attributed to a first-party cookie and then providing that through some instrument to advertisers is not, by any stretch of the imagination, the art of the impossible. And there are a number of different mechanisms to be able to support audience buys within a publisher's owned and operated properties within the programmatic supply chain, using things like deal IDs, private marketplaces, programmatic guaranteed, etc. I think what's interesting, and Sarah mentioned this, is that that's part of the equation. What publishers know about their own readers is part of the equation. What advertisers know about their own customers and prospects is also a big part of the equation. And for publishers really to benefit and to thrive in this new generation of identity capability, they are going to require a conduit that allows advertisers to bring their first-party data sets into the publisher environment and to activate and to target within that environment. So there are solutions, data clean rooms that are looking at particularly that problem and supporting that. I'd also say just on the long tail, what's interesting about the long tail, and I'm really going off piste here, I haven't really formulated fully my argument around this because I've been thinking about it since you got that question. You know, we always used to talk about the long tail as being where you could establish depth in audience. So premium publishers, large news outlets, they're great for scalability. They're great for premium environments and brand safe environments. And I'm sure absolutely that they have high quality audience data. But if you really want to understand a tribal audience that has in-depth engagement with a product or a service, that's the long tail. That's the blogs and the vlogs and, you know, very niche environments that don't scale particularly well. So I think it would be interesting, and maybe what we'll see is that premium publishers benefit and thrive. I agree with that on the whole, relatively speaking. Maybe through a course of mergers and acquisitions with smaller long tail publishers that have depth in audience understanding. I'd also like to understand whether or not advertisers go through acquisitions of long tail content producers because they know that owning that audience asset in the future in a first party context is going to be paramount.
Thank you very much, Miles. I mean, there were 3 different answers to the same question. That was brilliant. So thank you very much. And it was, you know, that's exactly what you want from a panel in a way. But it's great. Look, I'm conscious on time, so I'm going to head straight to the wrap-up question, which I know we're all answering here. What maybe we can do is the missing question we'll put in, we may be able to publish in the kind of the email that goes out to all the attendees and things like that. But the last question is very important. And, you know, we're encouraging stakeholders to get involved in contributing to the solutions via the new IAB task forces, national IAB task forces, public comment periods, etc. What would you advise? What would your advice be to anyone who isn't yet involved? And 30 seconds each if possible, and I'll jump straight to you, Sarah, if that's okay.
Yeah, my advice is get involved. If you're not, you should be. This, as we mentioned at the top, you know, this affects every player in our marketplace, every piece of the equation. And, you know, if you need to be understanding where you fit into that, you need to be understanding like what influence you have, and essentially what you need to be actioning to ensure that you are best placed for this going forward. So absolutely, you know, get involved, be part of the conversation. Events like this are really interesting and very informative for everybody. So yeah, just immerse yourself and figure out, you know, where you fit into that, so we can proceed. And, you know, this is less painful than it needs to be.
Thank you, Sarah. Miles?
Yeah, I think just to echo the point, this is obviously a very complex space, and we're talking in many cases about nascent technology. And so I think immersion and experimentation is clearly going to be required. I would say ask difficult questions of yourself in terms of the way in which you set up your own identity capability, and ask difficult questions of your partners in terms of how they can support and structure a robust identity management portfolio, because without asking those questions, you won't begin to start formulating some answers.
Thank you, Miles. Ben H, and then straight into Ben G, if that's okay.
Yeah, so I think just to, as Sarah said, you know, as much involvement from as many people as possible. I think what makes this industry really unique is it's very fragmented. There's lots of different motivations, different interests. So as wide an array of voices as we can have to contribute to this this challenge will lead us to a better solution, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So yeah, I'd echo that. So there's a load of individual components that are part of a much more complex ad ecosystem that we're all responsible for. And we're not going to be solving these issues on our own. If we did, it would be only from our own perspective as well. So it wouldn't be a balanced view. And I think the IAB do a lot of things very well. And one of the things that they do is their huge strength is to be able to bring a forum for bringing us, being the industry, together in a cohesive and effective way, driving for a single goal. And our goals here have got to be make the ecosystem cleaner, make it more effective and more transparent for everyone involved. So I think really the call to arms is that the time for action is now to shape our industry, and my advice would be jump right in with both feet. And the task force, which is in collaboration with IAB France, is a great example of that. That kicked off beginning of the week, end of last week actually, with the first meeting. So it's not too late to get involved. Get your point of view, push your opinions, and let's make the industry better that way.
Thank you very much all. Look, just to reiterate, get involved there. As you can hear, a clear message. Again, for more information on how to get involved in the IAB's work in this area, please contact Marie Claire or Helen, and we'll send their details around at the end. Look, thank you all to the panelists. Thank you all to the audience for dialing in. It's been a fantastic turnout. I'm really amazing talk. I know we probably could have done another hour on this as well. So I would ask you all go out, download the report, and if you haven't already, then if you have already, then share it with your organisation or network. So look, thank you very much again for your time, and goodbye.